Good morning, everybody. This is the highly anticipated follow-up video after my initial review of the Anker Everfrost 50 powered cooler. If you missed it, in April of 2024, I released an initial impression and review video where I went into detail and shared some initial testing. Well, now I'm going to share my thoughts after actually using it for a full season of camping. If you're not yet familiar with this cooler and you want a more detailed overview, go watch my other video first. In this video, we're going to start with a brief walkthrough, and then I'm going to share my insights after using it for about 6 months. All right, let's get into it. Some of this was in the first video, but there are some things I know now that I didn't know then. Let's start with this first side here, where the battery, charging port, and screen are located. Right here is where you can plug in the cooler so it can run without the battery in it, or plugging it in here will charge the battery if it's in. That port can be charged by an AC wall outlet or a DC car charger. Both were included. And then right above this port is your battery. The battery also doubles as a portable power station, so you can charge your phone or other electronics even while the battery is in here powering the cooler. I try to avoid using it for stuff like that because I want to save as much power as possible in that battery to power the cooler. You can also remove the battery from the cooler and charge it via USB-C. So if you return home after a trip and you don't want to take the cooler out of your car to charge it, you don't have to. You can just pop the battery right out and plug it right in inside. The battery has a 1 through 4 meter that indicates the approximate battery life remaining. It also has an XT port for solar charging, which has become my favorite way to keep this cooler powered while we're on the go, but I'll get more into that later. As we take a look up on the top, on the same side, here's our screen. Long tap the power button here to turn on the cooler, and the screen will turn on as well. The screen will show us the current temperature of each side and the remaining battery percentage. You can turn on or off each side of the cooler individually by pressing the power button and the arrow button simultaneously. And then you can set the temperature of each side, ranging anywhere from -4 all the way to 68 by pressing the arrows. Obviously, the colder you set the temperature, the faster the battery will get depleted. And then you can connect this cooler to the Anker app, but I'm not going to get into that in this video because that is something that I never use. On the opposite side is a fold-out cutting board / ergonomic handle for rolling the cooler, and then right next to that is a bottle opener. As we come up to the top to take a look at the doors, this is the larger door, just about a full rectangle measuring in at 11 by 12 by 13 inches deep. The other compartment has these 2 levels, as underneath this taller part is where the battery goes. Enough of the overview, let's get into my experiences. So I've got a bunch of things I want to mention here, but first of all, the cooler simply did its job of keeping our food cold. The powered function of the cooler was dependable, and we never needed to go get ice. Also, with that being said, it is just as amazing to not need ice as I thought it would be. No more trips to the store before or during a trip to get ice, no more water from melted ice getting into the food, and no more needing to dump that water to prevent it from getting into the food. Not needing ice is fantastic, and it leaves more space in the cooler for food and drinks. Next, the interior light in the cooler is way more important than I realized it would be. Whether I'm trying to look into the cooler at night, or if I'm trying to sneak into the cooler while it's still in my truck bed, I've got the cap on top of the truck bed, so it's dark in there. So that light really makes more of a difference than I ever realized it would. The baskets. These baskets are actually tremendously helpful for loading and unloading the cooler. Instead of either needing to carry all of your food and drinks out to the cooler or bringing the cooler into the house to grab your food and drinks, you can just grab the baskets, load them up, and then drop them right into the cooler. And then same with when you're unloading after a trip, you can just take the baskets right out of the cooler, bring everything inside, and put everything away. I did not realize how helpful those baskets were going to be. My next thought, you can pre-pack the cooler. With our old non-powered cooler, packing it was always the last thing we would do before leaving on a trip to help keep the food cold longer and preserve the ice. Now, if we're leaving, for example, on a Friday after work, I could pack up the cooler and plug it in the morning, and then when we get home from work, it's ready to go. That can help get us out the door quicker, and we don't have to worry about packing the food up before we leave when we get home. Here's my last thought before we go through an FAQ. Not needing a continuous power source is amazing, but it will still definitely be important to have a power source and keep it charged as much as you can when you have the chance, especially when it's really hot out. And I have 2 examples that I want to go over with you. We've used the cooler on 2 separate 4-night trips, and I took some notes. So the first one was back in May on a weekend where the high temperatures were mostly in the mid 60s and the lows were in the high 30s. I turned the cooler on at 10 a.m. on May 24th and I set both sides to 37 degrees. The battery was at 100%. On May 27th at 7 a.m., the battery life was still at 25% and I did not plug in the cooler once. The other one was on a 4-night trip on July 4th weekend and it was extremely hot. Temperatures were mostly in the 80s and 90s. On this trip, the battery struggled quite a bit. We started with both sides of the fridge on at 37 degrees and I needed to plug it in whenever I had the chance. If we were driving or out hiking, I would plug it into my power station. I tried plugging it into the DC port of the car, but that charged really slow. One night, overnight, the battery dropped from 99% to 22% in about 12 hours. And that was overnight. After that happened, the next day we were able to consolidate everything from both sides into one side of the cooler. After we did that, the battery only dropped from about 70% to 50% with it on for about 6 hours, and that was on a really hot day. On a trip like that where it's really hot, the battery is not going to last a full day. On this 4-day trip, we went through a full 1,000 watt-hour power station battery to help keep this fridge charged on the whole trip. This just shows how big of a difference the temperatures make on the battery. Now I'm going to go through and answer all of the questions that I've been asked since releasing the first video. Question number 1, how long does it keep the fridge cool? So I kind of just answered this by sharing those two experiences, but it really just does depend entirely on the temperature outside. Number 2, is it too big? So the 50-liter version is definitely huge. I was a little thrown off at first, but I've gotten used to it, and I don't think I would want anything smaller because when we do those longer trips, I want to make sure we'd be able to fit everything for at least a 4-night trip. And then in terms of fitting it in my truck bed, based on the setup that I have, it's not a problem to fit it. Number 3, were you happy to have the dual zones? Absolutely. So it's great for a couple reasons. One, I like to have the opportunity to put everything just in one side and then preserve some battery life. Also, I like to have the opportunity to use one side as a freezer and one side as a fridge. And then it also does help with organization as well. Number 4, did you find the side table useful? Nope. Literally, we did not use the side table once, but it is good to use it when you're dragging the cooler. It's a little bit more ergonomic. Number 5, is it too heavy? It is very heavy, especially when full of food. I think empty, it weighs about 60 pounds. And then when we have it full, I'm sure we've had it up to about 100 pounds. And then, so we keep it in the truck bed, and then we've got the deck drawers. So we've got to lift it up onto the tailgate and then get it up about another foot or foot and a half, however tall the deck drawers are. So it is a challenge. And then of course, where it's a powered cooler with electrical components, you don't want to be as rough with it. So we're trying to be as gentle with it as possible so we don't break it. So yes, it is very heavy. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you're considering which size to get. Number 6, how is the app? I literally never use the app. I know in the first video I tested it out. So if you want to see a little bit about the app, go check it out then. But I just don't really find it useful. I don't have a need for the app. This next one's not a question, but I think somebody mentioned in a comment. In my original video, I said that it came with solar cables, but it really doesn't. In order to connect it to the solar cables that I have, I had to buy an XT60 to MC4 connector. So that was about 20 bucks. Number 8, how fast does the fridge get cold? So it gets cold really fast, like about within a half hour. Unless we are pre-packing the fridge in the morning for a trip we're taking off in the afternoon, I don't feel like I have to turn on the fridge before we are starting to pack it. So, I mean, if packing the fridge is the last thing we do before we leave, I just turn it on right as we start packing it, and then we throw it in the truck, and it's plenty cold. Number 9, how is the durability? So far, it seems pretty good. Haven't had any problems. When we keep it in the truck bed, I try to keep it as stable as I can. Sometimes it does roll around a little bit. We haven't had any problems. And then, like I said, I mean, where it is, you know, a powered cooler, when we take it in or put it in the truck or take it out, we try to be as gentle with it as we can compared to a regular cooler that we might be a little bit more rough with. but so far it's held up just fine. Number 10, as promised from the first video, here is the ice cream test. Yep, you can bring ice cream camping. And lastly, I just want to mention, having a built-in battery is amazing, but having a way to charge the battery is essential. Like I said earlier, at least in my experience, charging it in the car's DC port just charges it way too slow. My two favorite ways of charging it is either using a portable power station, or what has become my favorite way is using a solar panel. I ended up installing a solar panel on the roof of my rooftop tent. I know not everybody watching this would have the opportunity to install a solar panel on their roof, so if that is the case, a portable power station should definitely suffice. And in case you're curious about the solar setup, I will narrate what I did and show some examples of it. I mounted a 100-watt panel to the roof rack of my tent. I've got this MC4 connector here and have the other MC4 wire running through here. I simply connect these and plug it into the fridge. If we're going to be hiking during the day, I will try my best to park in the sun and just let it charge while we're on the trail. I found a deal and the panel only cost me $48 and the cables were $20. I was kind of lucky that the roof rack was included as a promotion when I bought my rooftop tent. The other solution that I think would be fantastic for ensuring that you have enough battery would be to actually purchase a second battery for the cooler. That way you can make sure that you always keep one charged, and then if the battery on the first one dies, you can just pop in the second one and charge the first one. I think the battery retails for $250, but I've been checking and I've seen it on sale for as low as $100. In conclusion, I clearly love this cooler. The biggest problem for me is how heavy it is and trying to get it up onto the deck drawers and then onto the ground and getting stuff out of it. I have a friend who is very handy, and he is hopefully going to help me build a drop-down fridge slide so we can slide the fridge out from the deck drawers and then have it drop down so it will be tailgate height. I think that'll solve a lot of problems for me, and hopefully we'll get on that soon. Other than that, I can't say I've had any problems with it. Obviously, just have to be a little extra careful in hot conditions, and I think for me, the solar panel is going to be the solution for that. If you've decided that you want one of these coolers, but you're not sure what size you want, keep in mind that they all use the same battery, so the battery life is going to be a little bit better on the smaller one because it's not cooling as large of an area. Also, when considering size, keep in mind if you are switching from a regular cooler that needed ice, you will no longer need ice, so you might be able to go a slightly smaller size because you won't be having the ice in there. I think I went over everything. I can't think of anything else. So if you do have any questions, please leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time.